a brand new morning. Rise up to a brand dawning. As the passion start to rise, the energy fill the skies. I say thanks a favor to wake up and hear my neighbor. 60,000 people strong.
Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. I am your host, Shenell Felix, and you know whenever you see me sitting here, it's because we're about to have those conversations that you want to have while I ask those questions that you want asked. But before we get into this morning's interesting topics and conversations, let's have our news in 90 seconds. 75 public servants were honored for their years of dedicated service to Tobago at the 2025 Legacy Awards ceremony held last evening at Shaw Park Cultural Complex. The event, which officially closed the Public Service Week 2025, was hosted under the theme Honoring Dedication, Leadership, and Lasting Contributions of Public Servants. The ceremony was held under the auspices of Acting Chief Administrator Carl Murray and attended by dignitaries including Chief Secretary Farley Augustine. Additionally, Clifton Walker is seeking justice after his only son, 22-year-old Trayvon Walker, was shot dead early on Tuesday in Moriah. Police said Trayvon was ambushed around 2:30 a.m. when another vehicle forced him to stop. He tried to escape but was later found dead in nearby bushes. His father, heartbroken, described him as a kind, hard-working young man with no ties to drugs or gangs. Police believes the killing stemmed from a personal dispute and says an arrest is imminent. Finally, the government and opposition MPs support a motion on July 27th explaining the state of emergency declared on July 17th. Attorney General John Jeremy said the SOE was needed to disrupt gang-led plots to assassinate officials and attack state institutions. Key inmates were relocated and contraband phones were seized. Opposition leader Penelope Beckles supported the move but called for transparency and results. And that was our news in 90 seconds. Guys, this morning we jump right ahead into our conversations, and we are talking about keeping yourself and your belongings safe during the upcoming hurricane season. This morning I have the privilege of sitting in studio and chatting with Miss Melaura Agbeko. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Shenell. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Good morning to the viewing public.
Excellent. And first I want to start off by saying, for the persons that are unaware of when the hurricane season is, let us know.
Right, so the hurricane season spans from June 1st all the way to November 30th. However, we are in the rainy season and it spans all the way to the end of December. So we take all that into consideration going forward.
Excellent. Yeah. And, how has this hurricane season been thus far? Well, obviously, we have not heard of any incoming hurricanes, but, from your assessment at TEMA, when you look at it holistically, whether it be from, the rainy season, we usually see, I think last year we saw some flash floodings,
Correct.
Heavy rainfall, we saw some landslides. How do we compare this year with last year?
Last year, by this time, we would have been knee-deep in a lot of reports because last year around this time, we would have been dealing with Hurricane Beryl. And what I would say is that by this time last year, we had over 328 reports recorded at TEMA. Thank goodness, this year, what we're looking at from the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service, we haven't seen too much activity in the area of interest, which is in the Atlantic Basin, just a few degrees north and south of us here in Trinidad and Tobago, spanning across that entire area. And thank goodness we haven't seen anything yet, but we know that we have to stay prepared regardless of what is happening right now.
Excellent. And, even though we can say we are a bit in the clear, we're not seeing anything happening. Like last year, we were all praying and we had our fingers and our toes crossed that
Correct.
Beryl would have passed over us, and so she did. This year, we aren't seeing as much rainfall, though, being as heavy as last year, where we saw the flooding even in the Scarborough area. We saw flooding that we had not seen before. in certain areas that had not flooded before we saw flooding last year. Talk to us about that.
Well, right now we're still very much early in the hurricane season. So, what we would have seen issued by the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service is that we know that there's going to be a lot more moisture because we are in the rainy season. And with that, it brings the hydrometeorological events and the related hazards with those. So even though we haven't seen much yet, thank goodness, we know that we have to remain vigilant because there would be, based off of our trend analysis, some type of activity happening. Even if it's just something as simple as fallen trees that would disrupt road traffic or even utilities, something may happen. And because of that, we just have to ensure that we do our best to remain as vigilant as possible.
Excellent. And we are in the July-August season, and this is usually a heightened period for tourism. We have a lot of tourists on the island, and obviously, they want to go out, they want to enjoy all that Tobago has to offer, specifically, the reef tour operators. What can we look forward to during this season as it pertains to, them being able to manage that while understanding the weather conditions at this time?
The good thing is the July-August vacation normally doesn't bring too much activity. However, our peak hurricane season is anywhere between September, October, November. So when we look at that, we take into consideration with heightened activity that we would then have more to take into consideration, especially as it relates to our marine persons. So when it comes closer to that time, we ask them to ensure that they do the necessaries in terms of making sure that they are aware of all the issuances by the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service or even TEMA, because it would assist them in safeguarding their items. We don't want a case whereby they are getting undue damages to their vessels and so on because they didn't listen to the necessary messaging. So, as I said, July, August, we are normally in the clear, but especially around the peak hurricane season, we ask them to really pay attention to that messaging going out.
Excellent. And, climate change has been on the top of the agenda where global conversations are concerned.
Correct.
And the impact that it has on small and developing nations. We are seeing the result of that as we look on the coastline with an increase in sargassum, seaweed on the coastline. How are we managing that, and how can we continue to manage that going forward, specifically even during this hurricane season?
Yeah, there's intensification right across the board as it relates to climate change. And what we can do is ensure that we are more robust with our planning and with our infrastructural development as well. As it relates to sargassum, sargassum is now blooming so much in the Atlantic, and not only Tobago is affected, but we're seeing it with our neighbors in the rest of the Caribbean islands. There is an intensification because the water is becoming more nutrient rich, creating an environment for sargassum to bloom and to spread even more. And we're getting more and more carpets coming into our shores. But it's something that we definitely have to manage in terms of it being something that most likely is here to stay and would be impacting us for a very long time. So one thing that I have to say is that we have been partnering with the UNDP, and through the National Sargassum Committee, we have been able to acquire some infrastructure, some equipment, I should say, thank you, that would assist us in the cleanup. So very soon, you would be seeing that we have gotten some more equipment that would assist us in the beach cleanups and so on. Hopefully, at some point in time, we can go back around the table and see how we could tackle it from the sea end of things. But as it relates to shore end cleanup, we are doing our best to ensure that we have that equipment onshore in Tobago very soon so that we'll be able to have that cleanup mechanism in place.
Right. And the way you've explained it, it seems like we have to get accustomed to this being the new normal. what does that say for what can be done with the actual sargassum material? Is it that because this may be the new normal, persons need to begin coming up with innovative ways of utilizing the sargassum? I mean, we know about, globally and even within the region, we have, persons that are using it for different purposes. So is it that because this is the current situation, this has to become a part of the conversation?
Correct. We definitely have to see how best we could turn a quote-unquote bad situation into something that is innovative. One thing that we definitely have to take into consideration is that sargassum does have a high heavy metal content. So the necessary testing and so on has to be done so that we can ensure that persons who utilize it for any type of industry can do so safely. So at this point in time, my recommendation is to see how best, as I said, that we turn a bad situation into something that is innovative and creative, because it is a natural substance that can be utilized in several different ways. And we have seen it across the Caribbean where persons are using it as fertilizer. One of the other things that we also have to take into consideration is that because of coastal erosion, we need a framework for the sand to hold on to. And sargassum creates that framework for the sand to hold on to. So it helps to build back our beaches. And in places like Barbados, they're seeing that the beaches where there would have been significant sand erosion, that those beaches are starting to be built back because the framework of the sargassum is there to hold on to the sand. So as I said, it's not the most pleasant to deal with, because the scent of it is quite aggravating to some persons, and it's because it's quite pungent, especially when it's in its decaying phase. But we just have to figure out ways that we can live with it at this point in time instead of fight it.
Excellent. And, even as we talk about that level of innovation, we know that in the mid-year budgetary review, there has been conversations about the allocation for Tobago. I believe it was $100 million in loan funding for us to work on that coastal protection project. Are you a part of that? Is TIMA a part of that conversation?
At this point in time, I wouldn't be able to say. I'm sure at some level we shall be, because in terms of emergency management, there's several different phases of it. And in the first phase, it is mitigation and planning. So I'm sure at some point in time, if we have not already been brought into the conversation, we shall be brought into the conversation soon.
Excellent. And, even from your observation, because we know that there is the arm of TIMA that works on that. I can't remember, it's Geo something.
Yes.
Darian works on
yes,
that.
Geographic Information Specialist.
GeoInfo.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that they have done some work where they have used the technology to look at from an aerial view of where there has been the most coastal erosion on the island. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
Not at this point in time. I would leave the specialist to say to that. So hopefully one day soon we could have Darian back on the program. But we can see that there's it's significant in certain areas, and especially coming out of an oil spill, especially coming out of dealing with sargassum, it's becoming more and more apparent that we have to do more in terms of the coastal protection part of things. So definitely I wouldn't want to speak on something that's not my specialty, but it's something that kind of impact us at some point in time, especially in emergency management.
Excellent. And I think that we hear and we know about TIMA specifically when we are in positions of emergencies, but are there any other elements to TIMA that you think are often overlooked that you want to bring up this morning?
Yeah, definitely. So people normally see us in terms of the response phase, but we actually embrace a comprehensive disaster management model, which means that everything from mitigation and planning to response and recovery is what we are involved in. We try our best to have the best response. However, the best response and recovery depends on how good your planning is and how good your mitigation efforts are. So we, as I said, look at a comprehensive disaster management model towards ensuring that there is the best coordination that can happen from every sector and every level of what we do. So in terms of when you see TEMA, yes, it's exciting to see us out doing what we do, but there's a lot that happens year round. And what persons tend to not realize is that we are not just hydrometeorologically connected in terms of we're not just a hurricane people. We're not just here. We just don't pop up during rainy season. And we don't have quote unquote downtime. Emergencies can happen at any point in time, and we coordinate any and all types of emergencies. So once we know that emergencies are not planned events, they are not things that happen between 8 and 4, there's an element of TEMA that is always in gear, whether, as I said, it's from the planning and the mitigation efforts all the way to response and recovery. So it's a very comprehensive approach that we take in terms of what we do.
Excellent. And for the persons who don't know, usually when there's a fire, TEMA is there to do an assessment.
Correct.
And they give you a report on the fire so
Correct.
that you can take it to get social assistance. Is it that persons call TEMA individually, or TEMA comes along with the fire service when they respond to
it's a
fire?
mixture. It's a mixture of both, because we have a very good coordinating mechanism throughout Tobago Disaster Management Committee. So we have very good interagency collaboration efforts going forward. A lot of times when we do get these reports, we are brought in either by the client or by the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, and we work along with them in terms of doing the necessary preliminary damage assessments, and then further to that, the damage assessment and needs analysis that needs to be done so that they can figure out a way that they can build back better, or even get the social assistance that they will need going forward. So it's a collaborative effort with our partners, for sure.
Excellent. And even as we go back a bit and we continue to discuss the hurricane season, what are some key strategies that persons can implement in their homes and business to make, their property hurricane proof?
We always recommend that you always have some type of a plan. Have a family plan so that in the event of anything happening, you would know exactly what to do, how to respond, and what your family will be doing, especially if you're separated. So have that family plan to know your exits, and that's for your business as well. Know exactly what your evacuation routes are, what your muster points, where your muster points are. And we also recommend that you always have at least 72 hours worth of sustenance with you at any point in time. So that would allow you to live for 72 hours without having to do any panic buying. So for example, non-perishable foods, making sure that you have enough water on hand. Very, very important, especially in times of emergency, because we see people panic buy. We saw it for Beryl last year. A lot of persons started to panic buy and started to take things off the shelves. And when you went into the grocery stores, we realized that they were practically empty. But outside of that, we also recommend that you have grab and go bags, which would also have your necessary documents that are in waterproof cases or sleeves. Ensure that you have your identification. Make sure that you, as I said, you communicate with your family exactly what is going on. And just by doing these things and making sure that your household doesn't have things like things that can turn into projectiles, and something as simple as just going out and getting hurricane straps for your roof. They are very, very affordable, can be the difference between you having no roof or having your comfort after a hurricane or high wind event. So these are the recommendations that we normally do through our various units, especially through our community outreach program unit and our corporate communications unit, to having some active campaigns right now, trying our best to educate the public, especially through our campaigns right now.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you so much for your time here this morning, and I think that you have given us a lot of food for thought this morning. What about insurance when it comes to personal insurance for property insurance?
We always recommend that persons get insurance, because we can't always wait for hope that we would get some type of social assistance in terms of getting some type of grant or assistance in that type of way. Making sure you have insurance is pretty much your lifeline in the long run. And we have seen in different countries, different islands, the impact that insurance does have, especially in terms of the turnaround time of being able to build back, and especially build back better. It's a difference between you having to do long-term rentals because you can no longer live in your home, or and just being able to quickly have that turnaround and get back into your home in short as time as possible. So we always recommend that persons be proactive and to do the responsible thing to make sure that we can not be so burdensome in terms of social assistance. We have to also be responsible in terms of getting and putting things in place for ourselves as well.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you so much, guys, this morning. And this is Miss Agbeko.
Agbeko, correct.
Agbeko from TIMA. She's the Assistant Director and Operations Chief. This morning we had a healthy conversation on, staying safe during the hurricane season and other elements that concern all that TIMA does here on the island. Guys, we're going to take a quick break right here and we'll be back right after this. But before we even go to our break this one, we want to remind you that Books and Office Supply, Unit 44 at TLH Plaza, Scarborough, Tobago, they are open on the holiday. Yes, that means they are open this Friday, the 1st of August. That's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So you can come down on the holiday for all your book supplies if you're still trying to figure out how to fill out that book list, or you're just looking for any of the items that you need for your office or your personal use. Go down to Books and Office Supply at TLH Plaza. Guys, we're going to take a quick break right here and we'll be back right after this. See you soon.